Bryce Young and the Panthers make the playoffs in 2025 with these 5 moves, and the last one is the single most important move that helps Young reach his potential and the Panthers to make the playoffs for the first time since 2017. After a disastrous 2023 season, Bryce Young and the Panthers got off to another horrendous start in 2024, seeing Young get benched after week 2 for the next 5 games. But when Young returned, there were dramatic signs of improvement, leading to highlight plays, great performances, and seeing some big-time wins, including 3 in overtime, showing Young's late-game clutch. And now, in 2025, with a quarterback they have a lot of confidence in, the Carolina Panthers look to make a jump and potentially make a playoff run this season. With that being said, the first move to help Bryce Young and the Panthers get back to the playoffs is signing Azeez Ojulari to a 2-year, $17 million deal and signing Baron Browning to a 2-year, $12 million deal. This Panthers defense needs help. Last year, they were the worst defense of all time, and that sounds like hyperbole until you see that they gave up 534 points last season, literally the most that any team has ever given up in the history of football. This Panthers defensive unit lost its best player, Derek Brown, in week 1. Most of their other best defensive players were hurt multiple games last year, but even still, with everyone healthy, this wasn't going to be a great defense. They've already told 10-year Carolina vet Shaq Thompson that they're moving on. Makes sense. That ship had kind of ran its course, but they need some guys with experience and they need some pass rush so badly. PFF had them ranked dead last in pass rush grade as a team, and it wasn't even close. They were also tied for fewest sacks in the NFL. And both of these guys that we're adding can rush the passer. Browning hasn't had the numbers to match and had an uneven year last year with the Broncos because he was hurt, and then he got pushed out of their pass rush rotation before getting traded to Arizona. But with Arizona, he was their highest graded rusher per PFF, and with Arizona from weeks 10 to 18, he had a 15.9% pressure rate. That was the 14th best in football, and basically the same rate as Myles Garrett during that span. He's also only 26 years old, and it feels like Browning is poised for a breakout. I think that would be a big time and cheap ad for the Panthers. It's the same but opposite for Ojulari. He's produced really solid sack numbers when he's been in the lineup for the Giants. 8 sacks in his rookie year in 2021, 5.5 sacks in 7 games in 22, 2.5 sacks in 11 games in 23, and 6 sacks in 11 games last year. That's 8 sacks per 17 game average for his career. So the production has been there, but the underlying metrics haven't. PFF had him ranked in the bottom half of the league in most edge rusher categories last year. He hasn't exceeded a 9% pass rush win rate the last 2 years. That's below average in the league and was 96th in the league this year. But for Ojulari, he's also still young, just 25 years old at the start of next year, and you can see he has all the tangibles, extremely explosive and quick off the edge. He's got the tools, and considering it's a short-term, low-money deal, I think that's well worth the risk. Now, if you're the Panthers, you have 3 credible edge threats in Browning, Ojulari, and Jadeveon Clowney, all not very expensive and not on long-term deals. That's a good unit for next year and to set Carolina up for future years as well. That leads me to my second move that will turn Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers into playoff contenders next year, and that's by making these cuts. We're going to cut Miles Sanders to save $5.2 million, Shai Tuttle to save $3.3 million, A'Shawn Robinson to save $5.5 million, and Josh Nijman to save $3.6 million. We're saving Carolina some money here, and you'd think they'd be in a better spot cap-wise because they've been so bad as a team, but just 19th in the league in cap space at $28 million, and they just signed Ojulari and Browning in this plan, accounting for $14.5 million of that 28, so we got to make some more space. Miles Sanders can go. A lot more was expected of the running back when he was acquired from Philly last year, but he has not worked out in Carolina, and with the emergence of Chuba Hubbard last year, Sanders was just a backup, and a backup running back you can cut to save $5.2 million is a no-brainer. Shai Tuttle was ranked the 11th worst defensive lineman last year by PFF, 108 out of 118, and it'll save Carolina $3.3 million to cut him. He used to be a solid run defender, but not anymore, so goodbye. A'Shawn Robinson is in the same boat. He used to be so good on the interior defensive line, shutting down the run. Now he's not, and that one saves you $5.5 million. He can go too. And Josh Nijman is a solid backup lineman, but for $3.6 million in savings, I think Carolina should do that as well. Jadeveon Clowney has been mentioned as a potential cut candidate as well. That would save them $7.8 million, but he played well in the second half of the season last year when DJ Wanham came back from injury. And by the way, Adam Thielen is in the same boat. His cut would save them $3 million against the cap, but he was probably their best receiver the last 2 years, so I'm keeping both of them if I'm Carolina. Combine the 4 cuts that we decided on, that'll save Carolina $17.6 million on the cap on players who did not play well last year, and they're going to need that money for who I'm planning on getting with my last move. But luckily, we're not spending any money on these next couple of moves because this is what they should do with their 2nd through 4th round picks of the draft. So the third move, or should I say moves, for the Carolina Panthers to get themselves and Bryce Young back to the playoffs is drafting Andrew Makuba, Kevin Winston, and Jordan Phillips. We're going with even more defense in these rounds of the draft with 2 safeties in Winston and Makuba. There's debate between different scouting services on which one of these is the better prospect. I checked 3 different services. 2 have Winston and 1 has Makuba, but it's close. And with the Panthers having the 58th pick and the 74th pick in the NFL draft, I think that's a good location to get your safety duo of the future. They're different types of players, but their skill sets fit each other other really, really well. Makuba out of Texas is the more free safety. He's explosive with elite speed and change of direction. He can get in the slot and cover at a high level as well. He's got great instincts and great route recognition skills, but he needs to add some weight room to help more in the run game. Despite that, he is a big-time player. Winston is out of Penn State, and he's potentially a candidate to slide later in the draft because of medical concerns, because he tore his ACL week 2 last year and missed most of the season, so most of his tape is 2023 and prior. But Winston was one of the best safeties in the country before the ACL. His run defense is elite and might have the best ability to diagnose and attack run plays from any safety in the draft. He's got elite instincts when going downhill in the run game. He is a big-time tackler, and that's important for a run defense in Carolina that struggled last year as well for the Panthers. They were also rated by far and away the worst in the NFL by PFF. So you have more of the strong safety in Winston that dominates in the run game, combined with a free safety in Makuba that can help in the pass game. They should fit really well together in Carolina for years to come. However, if any of the top 3 safety prospects are available at 58 or 74, that being Nick Amanwore out of South Carolina, Malachi Starks out of Georgia, or Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame, I think Carolina should pick them instead because I believe those are just better players. However, I don't think those guys will be available at those picks, and Winston and Makuba could make a great safety duo for a team that got some of the worst production from their safeties last year. Their 3 main guys at safety all had 77th out of 98 safeties or worse rankings last year by PFF, so the group needs an overhaul. Now with Jordan Phillips, he is a big-time run stuffer at defensive tackle. He recorded 20 stops and 20 TFLs for Maryland in 2024, and dude is an unreal athlete. He was named to Bruce Feldman's Freaks list because of his 665-pound squat and 365-pound power clean, which is uncommon explosiveness for his defensive tackle spot. He has the tools to be an absolute game wrecker on the interior as a nose tackle. He likely needs an aggressive 3-4 scheme to allow him to be nose and command double teams. Luckily, Ejiro Evero, Panthers defensive coordinator, has just that scheme and could use Phillips in that role to complement Derek Brown, who should be returning next year fully healthy. And Phillips is just 20 years old right now, so there's lots of room for improvement, and he's got a ton of upside. The consistency isn't there right now, and he's not great as a pass rusher yet, which is why he could be available in the 4th round, but he is well worth the risk. Adding 3 rookies like this makes your defense much younger, but it helps you plug some of the holes that you had last year and gives you room to continue to improve in the future. So let's continue that theme with our 4th move that will take Bryce Young and the Panthers to the playoffs in 2025. At 8th overall, they should select Will Johnson in the 1st round of the NFL draft. There's a few guys who I like at 8th overall for the Panthers as well. If any of Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, or Mason Graham slide to 8, I think I'd rather have them over Will Johnson, but I don't think they're going to slide that far. I also understand the argument for Teterola McMillan at 8th overall if he's there, but my final move of the video will explain why I do not think that's necessary. I love Will Johnson. He's tall with a rare blend of size and fluidity, high football IQ, highly competitive. He's got everything you want in a cornerback 1, and if Will Johnson ends up an elite outside corner and J.C. Horn is your other corner on the outside, you have to love that duo if you're Carolina. In fact, when you look at Will Johnson's profile on NFL Draft Buzz, the #1 comparison to Johnson with a 90% similarity level, J.C. Horn. And Horn has been great when he's been on the field. His only issue has been health. By the way, maybe that's the case for Johnson as well. He's missed 10 games the last 2 years while playing for the Michigan Wolverines, 7 last year with turf toe, but most don't seem too concerned about it, so I won't either. Johnson's got the resume of a lockdown college corner, the numbers, the accomplishments, national champ, 2-time All-Big Ten, and 2-time All-American, and he's gotten comparisons to a couple of lockdown corners in Pat Surtain and Sauce Gardner as well. Pairing Will Johnson and J.C. Horn is huge for the success of the Carolina Panthers defense next year and going forward. And by the way, it gives me some Richard Sherman, Brandon Browner, Legion of Boom, big corner vibes. Before I get to my 5th and final move, if you like these type of videos, do me a huge favor and subscribe to the channel. Us here at Between the Uprights have a ton more content coming your way, especially for this NFL offseason, draft, free agency, predictions, hot takes, whatever you want, as long as it's related to football in the NFL, we've got it covered. So if you want more of this, subscribe and we got you. Oh, it's here, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for our final move that gets the Carolina Panthers back to the playoffs. And if they do this move, it'll also turn Bryce Young into a top 10 quarterback. We are going out and getting a guy who his own team has been looking for a reason to get rid of him for a while, but he's also one of the best receivers in football. The final and most important move for Carolina: trade your 2026 first-round pick for T. Higgins and sign him to a 4-year, $120 million contract. I think this video might come out after the franchise tag deadline, so I'll do both paths, whether they tag him or not. And apparently the Bengals and T are working towards a long-term deal as well. And if that gets done, I'm just screwed and I hate my life. First of all, if T doesn't get tagged, great. You don't have to trade for him and you can give him a major bag in free agency. Second of all, if T. Higgins gets tagged, that's where this plan comes in and you trade your 2026 first-round pick for him. Although the Panthers will probably be hesitant to trade any first or second-round picks 2026 after the trade for Bryce Young from the Bears that probably before the second half of last year looked like was an absolute fleece from the Bears and still probably is. But that trade can also be looked at as a reason to go get T. Higgins. In that trade, the Panthers traded away their number one receiver, DJ Moore, and left Bryce Young with no number one receiver, setting him up for failure early on. So if we got to give up our 2026 first rounder to get a bona fide number one receiver, we do it. Higgins' only real issue has been health. He's missed games in each of the last 4 seasons, including 10 games the last 2 years, but his production has been consistent. And whenever Jamar Chase was out of Cincinnati's lineup, he produced like a number one receiver. Last year, Higgins had the 5th best overall grade for NFL wide receivers per PFF and scored 10 touchdowns, also the 5th most in the NFL, despite missing 5 games. This year was his best year on per game averages. And Higgins is still just 26 years old. This is the type of guy that takes a young quarterback to a new level. We saw it with Diggs and Josh Allen. We saw it with Tua and Tyreek Hill. We saw it with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, and so on and so forth. All those teams paid a heavy price to get their number one receivers and change the trajectory of their franchises and of their franchise quarterback's career. And Bryce Young showed that he is capable of that last year with an offensive line that was solid for Carolina, 8th best in the NFL last year per PFF. Chuba Hubbard broke out with 1,100 rush yards and had the 9th best run grade last year per PFF as well. All the Panthers need is a number one receiver to open up that offense for everyone else. And if they make that leap for T. Higgins, we'll see Dave Canales, Bryce Young, T. Higgins, and the Carolina Panthers in the playoffs in 2025. I'm Matt from Between the Uprights, and that's going to be it for me. Peace.